A warm welcome to our viewers in Kenya and around the world. I'm Ernest Njenga coming to you live from the Factline African newsroom. This is what we have for you in the next half hour.
Kenya's increasing debt burden threatens to sink the country's economy. How AI and misinformation could be used to rig the 2027 outcome. Neglecting the environment is leading our urban areas to die. The correlation between goons and Nairobi's rising cases of crime.
You can join the conversation on our social media handles. Facebook at Factline Africa, X Factline_Africa, and the hashtag of the day is Today in Africa. On to our first story. While the official corridors of power remain notably silent, a fiscal storm is gathering over the country. Kenya's public debt has officially breached the set ceiling and now stands at 12.6 trillion. Yet, as the burden on the taxpayer reaches a breaking point, the government's silence on the path forward is becoming deafening. This vacuum is being filled by alarming independent revelations. The Okoa Uchumi or People's Audit recently warned that a mind-boggling 70% of every tax shilling collected is now swallowed by debt repayment, leaving a mere 30 cents for hospitals, schools, and infrastructure. Meanwhile, a high-stakes legal battle led by Senator Okia Omtata is challenging the very legitimacy of these loans. His petition, currently before a multi-judge bench, alleges that over 6 trillion shillings in debt was borrowed unconstitutionally. As we stare down a debt to GDP ratio of 67% and a domestic debt bill that has surged over 6.6 trillion, the question is no longer how we pay, but whether we are paying for a ghost loan. Our correspondent Sidi Omari sheds new light on this.
The burden isn't just growing. It's changing shape. While international headlines focus on our foreign loans, the real pressure is building right here at home. Domestic debt has quietly surged to a 6.6 trillion shillings, now making up over half our total debt pile. This inward shift has triggered a credit squeeze. As the government offers high interest rates to borrow from local banks, those same banks are pulling away from everyday Kenyans.
I think that the economy is not doing well at the moment. I think the political class is just emphasizing on what they think on their side is working, but when you come to the ground, things are different. People are actually sleeping hungry, others don't have jobs, people are actually suffering. So personally, I don't think the economy is doing good.
Private sector credit growth has flatlined, making it nearly impossible for small businesses to get the loans they need to survive. The math of the 2025 budget tells a final sobering story. We are now projected to spend nearly 3 times on debt, interest, and repayments than on building the very roads, hospitals, and schools that are supposed to power our future.
Well, basically, what I say that the pressure is coming from unexpected foreign debt. Because these countries have been on the spree of borrowing and making external borrowings. And remember, there is a cartel that you cannot do as much internal borrowing as you need. So basically, they have been forced to do external borrowing. Then the economic status is not growing as per se with the pressure to pay this particular debt. Because basically, if this money historically that has been borrowed could have been injected positively in the economy, then the economy would have grown to an extent to grow the tax base and the revenue generating stream for the government to be able to match with the demand to pay these particular loans and also sustain the local economy. So basically that particular catch point is what is facing these particular countries, because they have made borrowings over the last few number of years, but the money that has been borrowed has not been injected positively to the economy.
Whether it's dollars owed to the World Bank or shillings owed to local pension funds, the end result is the same: a tightening fiscal noose. As Senator Omtata's legal challenge moves forward, the country is left to weigh the cost of a debt that seems to be consuming the very economy it was meant to save.
And now our correspondent Sidi joins us live. Sidi, Senator Omtata and others are calling this odious and malicious debt. What is the likelihood that courts will actually freeze these repayments, and what would that mean for the country's credit standing?
The legal atmosphere here in Nairobi is electric, as Senator Okiya Omtata's petition has forced a conversation once considered unthinkable in diplomatic circles. The likelihood of the courts actually freezing these payments is no longer a fringe theory. In a stunning turn of events, in June 2025, the CBK itself filed court documents admitting that the petition raises substantial constitutional questions regarding illegal borrowing. By labeling a massive portion of our 11.8 trillion shilling debt as odious, Senator Omtata has handed the judiciary a nuclear option. If courts were to issue a freeze, the impact on Kenya's credit standing would be immediate and seismic. We would see our rating plummet to a D almost overnight. This would likely trigger a massive capital flight, a sharp devaluation to the shilling, and a total lockout from international capital markets. For the government, it's a terrifying catch-22. Continue paying and face a domestic uprising, or stop paying and face an international financial embargo.
Okay. With nearly 70 cents of every shilling going to interest, what are people on the ground telling you about the visible decay in services, and do they support the idea of a debt rebellion, even if it means a total government shutdown?
On the streets, that slow-motion bankruptcy is visible in every corner of the country. When nearly 70 cents of every shilling collected by the taxman goes towards interest and redemptions, the government is essentially running on fumes. According to doctors in public hospitals, they are working in facilities where basic supplies like gloves and intravenous fluids are frequently out of stock. In rural areas, the stalled projects have become monumental to the crisis, with half-built roads and schools being reclaimed by the bush. This isn't just a budget deficit. It's a social deficit that is eroding the very foundation of the state's contracts with its citizens. As for the debt rebellion, the sentiment I'm picking up from the youth and civil society groups is one of calculated desperation. Unlike previous years, where a government shutdown was viewed with universal dread, there is a growing segment of the population that now views a total shutdown as a necessary system reset. They are tired of being taxed into the grave to pay back loans they never saw or signed for. Support for a rebellion is high among the Gen Z and Alpha demographics, who argue that the government has already shut down on them by failing to provide jobs or quality education. They are willing to endure the chaos of a state paralysis if it means a full, transparent audit of the debt register. To them, the risk of a shutdown is a fair price to pay for what they call economic liberation.
We have just gleaned the facts from Sidi, as well as the situation from Kenyans on the ground, and would like to have a few more insights on the true state of national debt. I am joined by economist and former banker Christopher Legilisho to help us elucidate what all this means. Thank you for joining us. Let's start with the basics. In simple terms, what is the concept of odious debt? And in international law and economics, what are the key criteria for a debt to be considered odious?
So I think odious debt, my understanding of the term is debt that was accrued without the consultation of a population or citizenry, so illegally acquired debt. And that, so they didn't have the consent of the people, and the creditors were aware that that consent had not been sought. I think that's one of the, so essentially it's illegal debt that's been collected by a country.
Activists and politicians like Senator Okiya and Jimmy Wanjigi have specifically invoked the odious debt doctrine regarding Kenya's loans. What are their core allegations that make them feel certain debts, as particularly the Eurobond or specifically infrastructure loans like SGR, fit into this legal definition?
I understand that they've gone to court. I don't think our debt is odious. One, because before our government goes through the process of procuring debt, They go through Parliament, the budget is read, approved by Parliament, and even as the process they go through borrowing, their borrowing tends to be approved by Parliament. And so some of the politicians who you hear going out and talking about odious debt, they were actually in these parliaments that approved these budgets and approved that government can go and borrow. I guess the challenge and my understanding of the issues has been that they challenge or they question why government is using this debt not just for development but for recurrent expenditure. And I think that's more technical. How would a government run when in an environment where you have elevated debt service pressures? So I think their question is more technical. Can the debt only be used for development purposes? And I think that is more of an operational in nature.
The heart of the Kenyan's public complaint is that corruption and government misspending have led to this debt burden. How does corruption interact with the odious debt trap? How does corruption interact with the odious debt concept? Is a debt automatically odious if the proceeds were stolen, or must the lender also have been aware of the misuse?
Ideally, yes. So they're tied, because essentially if a regime is accumulating debt and it's not spent in the right way, then essentially that implies that that debt or those funds was stolen.
If outright repudiation carries too high a risk, what alternative economic and political measures can Kenya take to achieve debt justice?
Yes, so I think I would argue, if you get to a place where you need to restructure your debt or reprofile your debt, that's an alternative that you should take. I would also argue that doing a debt audit frequently would be helpful, because that will help to ascertain the true extent of your debt, ensuring that you have good debt management strategies, so looking at liability management, being proactive about that, also managing the process of procuring debt, because the challenges tend to emerge when you're borrowing expensively and recklessly. So managing a government's own appetite for debt is essential. So I would say, one, strengthening your institutions to handle corruption, strengthening your institutions to manage the debt, building capacity to raise revenues, and also I would also looking at mechanisms to spur economic activity that will help to, I guess, alleviate the debt burden, because essentially countries go into debt because existing resources are not sufficient to fund the agendas that they have. So therefore, trying to build economic an environment that is as productive as possible would also potentially help to limit the consequences of debt.
Thank you very much for taking your time to answer our questions. That was economist in charge of East Africa, Christopher Legilisho, helping us debunk odious debt. As always, keep the conversation going in the comment section and on our social media handles. For decades, the survival of our democracy was measured by the strength of our institutions. But as we look towards the 2027 general election, that foundation is facing an invisible onslaught. From AI-driven disinformation to coordinated subversions, the tools of digital progress are being weaponized to erode the very trust that holds our nation together. The scale of this digital warfare is already evident in our recent history. During the 2022 polls, monitors identified over 550,000 toxic posts on a single platform. While sophisticated deepfakes were used to falsely claim that election servers were being opened, this trend has only accelerated in recent times. At the heart of this crisis is a constitutional question. Is our 2010 constitution robust enough to protect us? Our able correspondent, Dama Muthui, sought the answers to some of these questions.
The battlefield for 2027 isn't in the streets, it's in the palm of your hand. While the 2022 polls saw 500,000 toxic posts, the new wave is far more deceptive. We are entering the era of synthetic reality, where AI can now clone voices and faces with terrifying precision. Already in 2025, we've seen high-profile deepfakes, from fake presidential resignations to fabricated confessions by activists.
I've seen situations whereby news turn out to be fake, but later on, when you realize from different sources, they are wrong. So, because of the technology we have nowadays, people use AI-generated information to make photos, videos, then you think that they are real.
It's a direct hit on Article 33. While the Constitution protects our freedom of expression, it never envisioned a world where an algorithm could manufacture a lie that looks exactly like the truth. To counter this, the 2024 Cybercrimes Amendment Bill introduces tougher penalties of up to 10 years in prison for sharing content likely to cause apprehension or fear. But critics want this is a double-edged sword that could be used to silence legitimate dissent. The question for the 2027 cycle isn't just whether we can detect the fakes, but whether our institutions can survive the liar's dividend, where real evidence is dismissed as just another AI trick. For democracy to hold, the truth must be faster than the algorithm. Dama Muthui for Factline Africa, Nairobi.
And now, to shed light on the disinformation and AI space, we are joined by tech analyst from Internews, Abraham Marita. Thank you for joining us. Generative AI dramatically lowers the cost and effort to create highly convincing synthetic media. That is deepfakes, audio, video, to human quality text. How has this scale and accessibility fundamentally changed the game comparing to pre-AI disinformation campaigns? And what is the most significant risk in terms of achieving manufactured consent?
That is mostly what we call, algorithms pushing some certain kind of content based on users' preference, like what a social media user would consume more. And I think it's an issue of what we are attributing to platform accountability, where platforms themselves have integrated algorithms to be able to decide and provide information based on a user consumption pattern. I think in the early beginning we saw this as mostly being used to provide adverts or place adverts according to what a user is consuming online, but now this has changed to be able to more or less silo individuals in regards to what they're consuming. It's obvious in so many platforms like TikTok, like Facebook, that if you start consuming information where there's a lot of violence, the algorithm will continue providing you with such information or videos or content that basically continues to show violent actions taking place. If you prefer, let's forget about violence. If you prefer looking at food recipes or food channels and such things, you'll find the algorithm is providing you and more of different options of that kind of content. So the biggest issue is mostly when it comes to harmful content. So if you're consuming content, for example, that is promoting suicide or suicidal thoughts, and the algorithm is geared in a way that it's supposed to continue providing you with information that you tend to be consuming, then it means it's pushing you to probably commit suicide. And those are the kind of what we call algorithmic amplifications that are affecting or promoting harmful content to spread online. And what we advocate for is that platforms should develop algorithms that are basically ethical to ensure that harmful content does not continue to be promoted. Otherwise, it should be limited. They should not put profit ahead of individuals' health, individuals' lives, or ahead of harming an entire society.
The rise of deepfakes introduces the concept of the liar dividend. That is the ability for a political actor to dismiss genuine damaging evidence as a fake because the technology to create fakes now exists. How severely does this erosion of public trust, the inability to trust any digital evidence, impact the foundation of a functioning democracy, and what is the long-term impact on political discourse?
Yeah, it's I'll say that it's a big issue, especially when it comes to trust for traditional media. Like, media is now facing trust deficit. Why? Because there's proliferation of misinformation, deepfakes, that are generated by AI, and basically what that means is that people no longer believe everything they see online. And when people, those who are basically perpetrating such information, when they use bylines or logos of media houses to portray a deepfake, then individuals who, for example, don't have proper digital media literacy cannot decipher and tell the difference whether this is a deepfake or this is true, or cannot be able to do a cross-checking with other platforms or verification. It means they will end up believing. And if they do believe and eventually come to learn that this deepfake was perpetrated using the platform of a certain media house, even though they were not able to verify that it was indeed that media house, it means that they lack trust in that particular media house. I cannot be able to really speak about jurisprudence in court on how this is shaping cases, but I know many individuals who tend to use that as an escape and say a certain video about me was a deepfake, but journalists are at a better chance of being able to do fact-checking on such information. There are tools available for journalists to learn to use, either to verify a video, verify images, or even audios, and be able to write out a statement and mention why they think this information is false, if it's AI generated or not, and all those things. And what that tends to do is to be able to inform the audience on what are some of the areas that they looked at to be able to debunk such information. On the other hand, it will be able to bring back the trust in media, because it will show that if you want to get reliable information, you basically need to go to a media house channel, whether it's also on social media or on TV or radio, and because of their verification skills, they'll make sure that they provide you with the correct information. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time, Abraham. We truly appreciate the insights. As always, our handles are Factline Africa across all our social media platforms. Talk to us and let us know what you make of AI as a tool for disinformation. We are taking a short commercial break, and we will be back with news on the shrinking biome of Nairobi County. Stay tuned.
Naitwa Zawadi, Go customer representative. I engage with customers on a daily basis. I manage social media, give solutions to customers if there's anything wrong. Tapi is a platform where we receive feedback or get feedback from our customers, reviews. So after payment through our till, once the payment has gone through, you receive a pop-up message. You can review us about the experience that you had, any complaint, either negative or positive, and we'll get back to you. The benefits that we've gotten ever since we used Tapi is the consistency of our customers. The quality of the food has improved. The feedback, either negative or positive. Hello, good people. My name is Zawadi. Remember, we tap into success with Tapi at Go, and we got the meat.
Nairobi was once celebrated as a green city in the sun, but today that emerald crown is tarnishing. Driven by unmitigated urban sprawl and a lack of planning enforcement, our capital is rapidly trading its biodiversity for a skyline of grey. As high-rise developments encroach on riparian lands and wetlands are paved over, the city is reaching an ecological breaking point. The data reveals a landscape in retreat. Over the last 2 decades, Nairobi has lost roughly 11% of its forest cover, with neighborhoods like Langata and Westlands seeing the most aggressive deforestation. Today, a mere 3% of the city remains under tree cover, a figure that leaves Nairobi trailing far behind regional peers like Kigali. This environmental toll is being worsened by the regularization of Unauthorized Development Act of 2025, a new amnesty program that environmentalists warn effectively legitimizes illegal construction on fragile riverbanks and green zones. Even our crown jewel, the Nairobi National Park, is under siege. Expanding housing estates have severed the historic Athi Kapiti Wildlife Corridor, threatening to turn the park into an isolated zoo. Diing Madol paints the picture on what happens to a city when it forgets to breathe.
Nairobi is heating up, and not just because of the sun. As we trade trees for towers, the city is developing urban heat highland, where concrete jungle traps heat, making some neighborhoods up to 5 degrees warmer than the surrounding countryside.
No, I do not think that we are conscious of our environment. I think there's so much deforestation going on. I think we've all heard stories of what's happening in Karura, how they're building tarmacked roads in between the forests. There's too many deforestation. There's too many deforestation that's happening. Yeah, and just pollution. There's garbage everywhere. Yeah.
The emerald crowd is not just falling, it is being signed away. The 2025 Regularization Act was meant to bring order to the skyline, but the critics say it is an environmental death warrant, offering amnesty to developers who build over the city's vital wetland and riparian corridors. The pressure is most visible at the southern bypass. The Athi Kapiti corridors, once highland for migrating wildlife, is now a graveyard of fences and foundations. This severed link threatens to turn our national park into a landlocked island. Kigali has shown that a green city can grow without losing its soul. Nairobi's challenge now is to decide if the future is breathable metropolis or concrete trap. If we don't enforce the line between the development and destruction, the city in the sun may soon find itself in the dark. Diing Madol, Factline, Africa, Nairobi.
To help us chart a way forward, we are joined by environmentalist and lecturer Dr. Jane Bosibori Oteki. Thank you for joining us. To kick us off, as an environmentalist, what are the most immediate and visible signs of the biodiversity loss here in Nairobi? Okay, tuanze tu tena. To kick us off, as an environmentalist, what are the most immediate and visible signs of biodiversity loss here in Nairobi, and which specific native species, be they plants, birds, or insects, are the most critically threatened by the current pace of development?
When you are talking about biodiversity, you are talking about everything. You're talking about plants, you're talking about animals, you're talking about all those species, yeah? Now, a study that was done in Kiambu about 1 year back, the study was on the bees. You know, bees are very important in the pollination and all that. It was realized that these have decreased to a very great extent, and of course that affects pollination in that given area. Again, when you look at the development, I will not name particular species, but I would say the indigenous species in all these areas have been affected to a very great extent. When I was doing my undergraduate, the first question I was asked in geography was, what do you think Nairobi will be like in about 10 years? I was not able to imagine that it will be what it is. But what has happened is that we have cleared most of the places. Wangari Maathai tried to prevent the construction in Karura forest. You know, when you have a particular area where there is a forest, a wetland, or whatever it is, you have your biodiversity. But when you have construction, it means you have removed all the trees, you have removed all the plants, all the organisms in that given place. So the development, much as it is for the population to find a place for residential, for offices, and all these, we are really impacting negatively on our biodiversity.
Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate the insightful conversation. As always, keep the comments coming across all our social media platforms. Remember, the handle is at Factline Africa. Violence remains one of the world's most persistent silent killers, claiming over 1.5 million lives annually and ranking as a leading cause of death for those under 45. Here in East Africa, we face some of the world's highest homicide rates, not from traditional warfare, but from the brutal reality of urban crime and social exclusion. In Kenya, this crisis is reaching a boiling point. As our economy falters, the statistics paint a grim picture of a generation at risk, with youth making up a third of our population, but facing a staggering 75% unemployment rate. The path from desperation to deviance has become perilously short. This is reflected in our correctional facilities, where over half of the prison population is aged between 16 and 25. But today, we look beyond the numbers to a more disturbing trend, the weaponization of the goon. Following the recent youth-led revolts across the country, critics argue that a goon-first political response has inadvertently incubated a new wave of lawlessness. In urban centers like Nairobi, the lines between political mobilization and organized crime are blurring. As the state reliance on informal security actors grows, community trust in the police has plummeted, fueling a rise in mob justice as a resurgence of vigilante groups. From the return of extortion rings to a spike in daylight robberies with violence, the common mwananchi is caught in the crossfire of a failing economy with a volatile political climate. Is the current surge in petty crime a symptom of poverty or a calculated byproduct of political survival?
In a country where 3/4 of the youth have no formal work, the street becomes the only employer, but this isn't just petty crime anymore. It's a survival economy fueled by desperation. The gun-first response to recent protest has created a dangerous precedent by using informal actors to manage dissent. The state has unwittingly validated violence for hire. This has birthed a gun-as-a-service model where the same individuals paid for political muscle on Tuesday are turning to extortion on Wednesday. Former security loses its grip, a darker shadow is rising, vigilant justice.
Naishi Kibera. Sasa hii crime mi hadi inatisha. Juu hadi mi nikitembea hivi nasikia siyuko safe. Sasa hata serikali tuwezi ililia juu imeshindwa na kazi.
With trust in the MPS at an all-time low, communities are increasingly taking the law into their own hands, a cycle of violence that only adds to the 1.5 million lives lost to homicide annually. Poverty might be the spark, but the current wave of lawlessness is being fanned by a political culture that sees youth as a weapon rather than a resource. Unless the economy provides a ladder and the state restores the rule of law, the common mwananchi will continue to pay the price for a peace that is only skin deep. Ndicho Marion, Factline Africa, Nairobi.
And now, to discuss the state of lawlessness in our urban centers is criminologist and security expert Albert Msafiri. Thank you for joining us, Msafiri.
Thank you so much for having me.
For starters, how would you describe the current crime situation in Nairobi? Are we seeing a real rise in crime or just better reporting?
Okay, thank you, Ernest, for the question. I think it's a pretty valid question, especially after the unrest that we have witnessed in the past 2 years, I'd say. The youth protests of 2024, June 2024 and July 2025. You asked the question, your question was if it's better reporting or there's a real spike in crime. Now, if you look at the statistics from Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, a report we call the 2025 report on economic growth, the economic report of 2025, what it states is that there's an actual decrease in the reported crimes in Nairobi. Let me check my records. It says the Nairobi City Police Command recorded the highest number of reported crimes in 2024, which was 9.6% of the national total, a decrease from 10,108 cases in 2023. So overall, there is a decrease in reported crime. However, when you look at this, the situation on the ground, the situation might be a little bit different from what is being reported. Now, what do we attribute this to? Number one, we'd say there's less trust, or there's a decrease in trust of citizens to the authorities. We've seen that trend since June 2024, and as we are looking at it, as it continues as we continue this trend, we've just realized that people are looking more to social media than to actual police stations. So there is a real increase in crime, but less reporting of the crime, and people have turned to what we call citizen reporting. I think that's what you guys call it.
During the 2024 and 2025 youth demonstrations, there were reports of goons operating freely. How did that environment influence Nairobi's crime dynamic afterward?
Now, I'd relate this to what we would call leniency from law enforcement. And when that happens, you see a different landscape, a very complex security dynamic emerging in the CBD or in the city. Now, some of the things that we witnessed that the Nairobi business community took up arms in its own way. They decided to defend their own businesses. Yes, we also saw goons, I'd call them goons, because some were on borders, others were on foot, some had whips, some had clubs, and these guys, in one way or another, didn't seem to capture the attention of authorities. And now, what happens in such a case? This brings about emboldened criminality. So we see that now criminals are free to act, or look like they are free to act without any consequence. So what happens in such a case? You see that now crime becomes, number one, a source of income, or quote unquote, what I'd call, it becomes economically viable as an option for the unemployed youth in low-income settlements. And what that brings about also in Nairobi is that we see a rise in crime, because now the youth are not afraid of police. They are not afraid of being arrested and taken to court and processed. They're not afraid of the criminal justice system, because now the authorities and political figures are now in charge, or they're even using them as manpower to make the protest look illegitimate.
Thank you very much for joining us, Msafiri. This has been a stimulating discussion. For the folks watching us from home, that is all we had prepared for you here at Factline Africa. As always, talk to us on our social media pages on this and other stories. I have been your host, Ernest Jenga. See you next time, same place, same time.